Welcome to Priceless Takes.
And we are live from South Carolina in the United States. Welcome back, everyone, to Priceless Takes, episode 41. What an episode we have in store today. But it wouldn't be possible without my lovely guests joining me back on the show after some time off is Tyson McMullen and Reuben Lind with me. And a first appearance on the show today, our very special guest, Mr. Josh Payne. Gentlemen, how are you all today?
Very good, thanks.
Thank you,
Very
Josh.
good, very good.
Listen, now
Very
there
good.
is a lot to talk about from the NBA and the NFL, but we will talk about the NBA in the first half of the episode and move on to the NFL in the second half of the episode. But we will get straight into it because an absolute bombshell has been dropped on all of us. I know you three in Australia would have been asleep when this happened, but it was in the middle of the day for me when Damian Lillard traded to the Milwaukee Bucks from the Portland Trail Blazers in an absolute blockbuster of a trade, forming the hottest new duo in the NBA with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard. The package goes as this. The Bucks receive Dame. The Blazers receive Jrue Holiday, DeAndre Ayton from the Suns, Tumani Kamara, a 2029 first-round pick, and 2 pick swaps. The Suns, the third team in this trade, who helped facilitate this, received Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. Now, all we heard this offseason, guys, was Dame is going to go to Miami this, Dame is going to go to Miami that. And right underneath everyone's noses, Milwaukee swoops in, gets the star point guard to Wisconsin. Now, Damian Lillard averaged 32 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists in 58 games last year. Obviously, we know what happened with the Bucks in the playoffs, but this trade seems to have catapulted them to the forefront of the title race. Now, for our viewers, Josh, not only has he been brought on the show today because of his immense basketball knowledge, but he also happens to be a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks, and I appreciate, as will you viewers, his perspective for this trade and how he views it. So, Josh, I'm going to ask you first, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is this trade for Milwaukee?
It's really hard for me not to say 10. Luka. I think I'm not going to. I'm going to say it's a 9 just because of the defensive side of the ball that we do lose in Jrue Holiday. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about how amazing Dame is as a basketball player. Everyone knows that. I'm really, really excited. I think this is going to propel Milwaukee to a whole new level of basketball. And we saw last year, and ever since the ship, really, the Bucks have kind of been sliding down and down that championship scale a little bit. This propels them right back up there. So I think it's a 9 or 10 definitely.
Look, yeah, it's pretty hard to disagree with that. Like it's Damian Lillard. Like, come on, you've got all-star point guard, but like JP said, you are missing that defense. Jrue was that defensive juggernaut. He was running that joint. Also not so sure about their backup point guard position. I'm not aware of their roster that much. Do they have a solid backup?
They have Dragic signed to the roster.
We also
Isn't he like
I saw this
40?
week that we're going out for we're targeting campaign as well for a backup point guard. So
Yeah.
Campaign, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I did see Isaiah Thomas give a little tweet saying, "You need a
Yeah.
backup." But yeah, look, just that just those two downfalls are only issue I can see. But besides that, it's a pretty damn good upgrade. Not gonna lie, with Dame. So can't really hate on that.
I really like the trade. I love the Milwaukee Bucks. I picked them to win last season. But the two flaws that I saw with them was their free throw shooting. They ranked 29th in free throw percentage last season at 74.3%. And Damian Lillard is an 89.5% free throw shooter. And their ability to close as well to the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, Damian Lillard in that team is going to help them close. Like, you look at game 4, Milwaukee were up by 11 in the fourth quarter. And it was their game, but then they ended up losing by 5. Same thing in game 5. Like, Milwaukee were up by 16. And then they lose by 2 in overtime. And Giannis shot 10 of 23 from the free throw line. Like, I think Damian Lillard is going to add to that closing ability. We've seen the buzzer beaters against the Houston Rockets and OKC. And yeah, his ability to close as well. I think he'll be able to close those games out.
Reuben, he's not just going to add to their closing ability. He is their closing ability in other sense, because we saw in the playoffs that Giannis could not do it all himself. And I agree with mainly what Josh was saying is since that championship, they have lost a bit of their identity. But obviously, in that championship run, who was the main closer? Who was the guy when Giannis couldn't hit those big shots? It was Chris Middleton. Now, since that time, he has been dealing with a lot of injuries and a lot of issues himself, and we were yet to see the best of him in last year's playoffs. Jrue Holiday, I love Jrue Holiday. He's one of the best two-way players in the NBA. But when it comes to offense, the amount of offense you get from Damian Lillard, not only from his scoring ability, but also from his playmaking ability, far outweighs what you lose in Jrue Holiday with his defense and his playmaking skills. I think this is a trade that puts Milwaukee, for me, at the top of the Eastern Conference. Before I even begin to look at any of the other teams. Reuben, I did also pick the Bucks to win the championship last year. I still think with Giannis fully healthy, it might have been a closer series. We don't know, but we know what we know, and that is that they did lose in the first round. But when I look at the Lillard situation, I think that his closing ability is something that they need. And also, Tyson and Reuben, you guys have heard me talk about this time and time again on this show. Damian Lillard is yet to make the finals in his NBA career and yet to win a championship. And I am under the firm belief that for the majority of championship winning teams are centered, or not centered, but at least have a dominant big man. Obviously, we have the exceptions of the Jordans, Bulls, the Splash Bros, the KD Warriors. But when you look at the majority of championship teams with dominant guards, they also have dominant big men to go with it. We saw Giannis when they won, Jokic last year, Kobe and Shaq, Kobe and Pau Gasol, Dwayne Wade, just the list goes on and on, the Duncan Spurs. So this is something that Damian Lillard has been missing throughout his career. He's been missing that dominant big man, that if he can't do it, he can dump it to Giannis, or he can give it to Giannis, and he will provide that second option. Well, there's honestly not even a second option. A second option, I say loosely, during closing, because it's really a 1A, 1B, and Giannis is still better than Dame. But similar to in the championship run, when Middleton took more of that closing role on, even though Giannis was still the best player, it'll be the same when Dame will be expected to close, but Giannis is still the best player and the leader of this team. But I want to throw it back to you guys. Josh, I might start with you again. Does this trade, I've just talked about how I believe they should be at the top of the Eastern Conference. Where do you think they rank in terms of title favorites?
They have to be first. And look, as you said, like, it's so hard to go against them in the East, but they won. They came first in the East last year, regular season wise. So they had the best record in the East, and they propelled their team even further. I think they had the best record in the NBA as a whole. So
yeah,
it's you honestly can't sit here and say they aren't title favorites. I don't think. I think you got the Suns in that conversation as well with the super team they're putting together. And everyone's saying it's going to be a Bucks Suns finals, but every time we do have those comparisons, there's always injuries that come into place. And I think barring injury this season for the Bucks, which they were unlucky with last year, with Giannis missing those first two games of that Heat series, I think it's very hard to say that the Bucks aren't the title favorites.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with that. Like, it's pretty hard to disrespect them, but when you add Dame, never run from the grind, Lillard to the team, that playoff push will definitely help. But I won't say they're exactly the favorites because obviously we haven't seen them yet. But I would say they're top three, up with the Suns and Lakers. So that's just my take.
I agree with Tyson. I think the top three, I'd say with Nuggets and Lakers, maybe Celtics. I do have a health concern though with Damian Lillard.
Get the Celtics out of here.
From the 2013 season to the 2021 season, Damian Lillard had played at least 66 games in every regular season. In the last two, he's only played 53% of the available games. He's only played in 87, 164. I don't know if that could be to do with age, but if he does get injured, that could be a deep concern for the Bucks, which is why I like the teams like the Lakers. They have deep roster. I think the Bucks at the moment are lacking in that a bit, and as Josh alluded to, the perimeter defense could be an issue. So that's why I have them top 3, but they are strong contenders.
Well, I understand what you're saying with the health, Reuben, but I look at also in his playoff record. Obviously, Portland haven't been competitive for the past few years, but historically, in the playoffs, Dame has been there and he has been playing. Personally, I think the health reasons could be a combination of age, but I also think that when you're playing on a horrible team like Portland, somewhat in the season, you're going to get to the end of the season because a lot of the times he was shut down. And we saw that this season as well. They weren't really competitive, and it started off with an injury. They never really told us how bad it actually was, and it sort of ended up in him just getting shut down for the season because Portland wasn't that good. And they wanted Scoot Henderson. They wanted to build for the future. So I'm not summarily dismissing your argument, but I think that now when Damian Lillard has been put into an instant championship or bust situation, that I think this is going to have an effect. And even if he does have a few niggles and a few injuries, when it comes to the playoffs, he's still going to play through those. I do think it's a possibility, but I think that when you look at what he brings to the table, if he does sit some time in the regular season, they are still very formidable with Giannis on the court. Because if you look at it, they lost Jrue Holiday and then Grayson Allen. Like the depth, they didn't actually lose that much. And when you look at the Bucks, I still believe they're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. You have Giannis, you have Brook Lopez, who was a top 3 defensive player of the year candidate. And then off the bench or starting, I don't know. I think that Connaughton is going to start and Portis is going to stay as the 6th man. But ESPN right now put Portis in the starting lineup and Connaughton on the bench. I'm not sure. That'll be up to the first-year head coach. But I think that the health is something to worry about. But I think with what's been happening, I'm sure you guys have been reading up on it. Giannis talking about his future with the Bucks. This is something they needed to do. But I do want to talk about the first-year head coach because it is something that gives me, I think, the most concern when I look at this team is you had Mike Budenholzer. He won a championship with you last year. He was pushed out the door after losing in the playoffs. And now you have Adrian Griffin, who has come in to the role, first-year head coach. He was Toronto's assistant. I question how he is going to be able, because it's hard for any first-year head coach. He has his hands full with the Milwaukee Bucks. They have a top, in my opinion, the best player in the NBA in Giannis. And now they have a top 10 player when healthy in Lillard. Championship or bust for a first-year head coach. That's not an easy task. So I am very interested to see how he goes about his business and what he puts forward to the table with this Milwaukee Bucks team.
It's also hard for him because, we don't know, being an assistant coach in Toronto for so long, we don't exactly know what his coaching style is for like as the leader of a team. So we don't know like how he's going to structure things. It's also a completely new Bucks roster with a new star player. So it also has to be communicating that he can't just go, okay, this is what you guys did last year, we'll run this scheme, because it's with you add Dame, it's a whole different dilemma to the whole situation. We don't know how this team is going to function having these two options. Dame obviously has played his whole career as number 1 option, right? Behind Giannis this time though, he is, as you said, he is 1B, right? He's an amazing player. He's going to want the ball in his hands, but he is still behind Giannis. It's going to be hard for Griffin to come in, who hasn't had that experience as a head coach and leading a team, to go, okay, this is a new plan or this is a new system we're running. So it's going to be tricky to see. I think he's lucky that he has these star players coming in. So in that sense, as you said, it is kind of championship or bust, but he kind of has that security that he knows he has players that can get the job done.
Yeah,
right? We know that. And we saw when the Bucks won the championship in 2021, Dame led the league in clutch time, right? We spoke about this before. the best Bucks player in crunch time was ranked 31 in that championship year, right? You adding that's the year they won the championship. They have the best clutch player was ranked 31 in the league. So this year we've got Dame, right? You got Giannis, who obviously is still if you take him down low, he's still a good crunch time player down low, right? He still draws attention. He's not a complete unguarded factor. And then you still have the Chris Middletons, you still have the Damian Lillard. So I think Griffin is going to be lucky in the roster that he has to work with. But it's just going to be interesting to see how he plays it because we don't know.
Yeah. No, we saw what Darvin Ham did last year with the Lakers. And there's been other instances too. So I think at the end of the day, the NBA is a players' game. The players are the reason with you. At the end of the day, whether you win the championship or not comes down to the players you have. The coaches make a big difference, but when you compare it to something like the NFL, where it's mainly a coach's game, this is a player's game. But I do want to switch gears because one of the big elements that has now come out of this trade is the availability of one Jrue Holiday. No one is really expecting Portland to keep him. He's also on an expiring deal, and it seems like Portland now, entering full rebuild mode, is really trying to just stockpile draft capital and assets. Holiday, one of the best two-way players in the league at the guard position. He's also a very good scorer. He's improved as his scoring ability. When he was with Milwaukee, he was 48% of catch and shoot three-pointers last year. He averaged just under 20 points, but 7 assists per game. Obviously, we know the story about how he wanted to retire a Milwaukee Buck. That was a bit heartbreaking to sort of see in such quick succession, but he will be eager to take his talents potentially to an Eastern Conference team to compete with the Bucks. And I want to hear what you guys have to say. The teams that seem to be hot on the radar for Jrue Holiday are Miami, a team like Philadelphia, a team even like my Clippers is said to be on the radar, and also the New York Knicks are a couple of teams, just to name a few. Obviously, there's some more, but Reuben, I want to throw to you first. Where do you want to see Jrue Holiday end up? Where can he help the most?
I want to see him at the Boston Celtics. I think they lack a true point facilitator. Like, you look at the last few seasons, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have the worst dribble I've ever seen. They constantly turn over the ball. Like, they rank the highest in turnovers in the 2022 finals against Golden State. They need that ball handler. And Jrue Holiday, I think, is a true facilitator, and he'll be a leader for that locker room because he's 33. He'll be their Marcus Smart. So I think he'd be great. Like, he'd fit perfectly for the Celtics. Be able to carry up the ball, distribute.
Yep.
I think he averaged like 7 assists last season, and he's a great defender. I think Jrue Holiday is truly an underrated player. I'd love to see him at the Celtics.
Can they afford him though? He's on as Giannis used to call him. They called him big money. They called him big money. And then bag.
I've actually seen a trade where, like, because he does have a big salary, but Malcolm Brogdon also has a big salary. I've come up with a trade. So I saw this on an article somewhere. It was like Jrue Holiday, you could trade him for Al Horford, Malcolm Brogdon, Payne Pritchard because he doesn't play for the Celtics, and 2 second-round picks for Jrue Holiday. That was like one of the trades. The salaries did align.
Do you think Portland would go for that though?
I don't think Portland would.
I don't know. Because I like the idea, Rube, but I think for them to trade Jrue Holiday, I think either a young player, and don't get me wrong, Payton Pritchard is good, but I don't think when you have a dominant backcourt in Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons, the Celtics are screaming for Payton Pritchard. I like the idea, but I think either a young player or a first-round draft pick, I think, needs to be involved in order for a team like the Trailblazers to give some serious consideration into trading Jrue Holiday. But I'll let you continue.
Look, I agree. Like, with the veteran players, like, you need to match it with draft capital because that would be the main aim of the trade, to give up the Brogdon expiring contract and to get the draft capital for the obvious rebuild that they're going to go through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah.
Yep. Tyson.
Yeah. No. Sure. Okay. Look, I reckon it would be a great fit for Boston. It's pretty much just an upgraded Marcus Smart, but the way to get him there, that's going to be too hard. Because like you said, if you want to give up Payton Pritchard, another young guard, Portland already they're stacked on young guards. They got Simons, Shaden Sharp, Scoot. Like
Yeah.
it may be hard because I know Peyton Pritchard did want out, but going to Portland, I don't think it would be much fun there either. But I do reckon Jrue Holiday would be a good fit on Miami. I'm not gonna lie. That another guard present there alongside Tyler Hero and Jimmy, Bam. I reckon it'll be pretty damn good there. Not gonna lie. Miami are like suckers for missing out on Dame, so I reckon the least they can do is try and get another All-Star guard in Jrue Holiday. So I think that would be a great fit there. I'm liking it. But what I do love is when an All-Star goes into free agency, first thing I see, they're putting a Lakers jersey. So never count out the Lakers. Never count out the Lakers. You never know.
Why would you want Jrue Holiday? You signed Gabe Vincent. You got Austin Reeves. You have.
We'll have anyone. We'll take anyone.
Jrue Holiday's got that fat contract though,
okay.
as well. So match the salaries of AD and LeBron. I don't think it could work.
Yeah, it's gonna be like adding Russell Westbrook again. You know, like, not a big contract. It's just not gonna be well.
Oh, no.
So yeah.
Yeah, and how much of a kick in the guts would that be to Dame Lillard if Jrue gets sent off to Miami? We see that I heard today that the Heat and Trailblazers haven't spoken since Summer League, right? So that was in July. So it's been 2 months since they've spoken. That would be really hard on Dame. Where I want to see Jrue go, and I don't really see a world where this happens. I would love to see him in Chicago. I think a three punch of because obviously they probably don't have Lonzo Ball for quite a while this year. So a Jrue Holiday, Levine, and DeRozan team would be insane, and they still have a decent center. They got Vuk. I don't know if they would be able to keep him in any trade with Trailblazers, but it would be a bit of a fantasy. And if Oscar was here, I'm sure he'd love that as well.
He would. He would.
The Bulls just want anyone. They need help.
Take the garbage man.
Take anyone.
Yeah, they would. I think the Bulls would be an interesting experiment, but I think if there's probably one team that is just in the worst middle ground I've ever seen, it's the Chicago Bulls. And I don't think really adding Jrue Holiday is really going to change that for them. And when we talk about big contracts, that also doesn't really help in Chicago either, because all three of DeRozan, Levine, and Vooch have all got some pretty good salaries. But it would be interesting because DeMar likes to play the three, so it would work, and they were flying high with Lonzo Ball as the facilitator of that team, so it could work. And I honestly, a part of me doesn't even know where I want to see Jrue Holiday. There's a few destinations that come to mind. Well, yes, but no. I just don't see a world where Russell Westbrook, Jrue Holiday, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George just form a team. Like, it could happen, but in crunch time, I mean, they benched Westbrook during crunch time until Kawhi and Paul George got injured. If they benched Westbrook during the crunch time, then, I would agree. But I think Jrue Holiday needs to have the ball in his hands, and so does Westbrook. It could work. And a couple of years ago, before Westbrook came to the Clippers, when Jrue Holiday requested a trade from New Orleans, the Clippers were aggressively pursuing him from all reports. So I wouldn't be surprised if they called, but I don't see a scenario where he really goes to the Clippers. Miami makes sense from a basketball perspective, particularly after they lost Gabe Vincent. I'm sure Tyler Hero also isn't going to be the happiest right now after his name was just trending on Twitter the entire offseason in Portland, because that's all was talked about, is that he was the center of the trade package for Lillard. But for the fact that Portland and Miami wouldn't ring for Dame, but then Jrue Holiday goes to Portland, and then all of a sudden they ring Portland for Jrue Holiday. Not only is it a kick in the guts of Dame, but it just doesn't make sense that they would pick up the phone for Jrue Holiday, but they wouldn't for Dame. I don't know. Unless Miami was waiting for Portland to call them to trade Dame, which I doubt. I think that'd be a foolish idea if they were doing that. But where do I want to see him play? There's two teams. And the first team is because I believe that James Harden is going to leave Philadelphia and they need to fill that void. I would love to see Jrue Holiday paired with Joel Embiid. But where I would actually like to see him go to form an elusive backcourt duo with Jalen Brunson is to go to New York and go to the Knicks. Because personally, I think that would just add another layer to this team. It's a veteran presence. It's a defensive presence. They're already a good defensive team with Mitchell Robinson in the middle, RJ Barrett on the perimeter, Josh Hart. They have a defensive identity. And Brunson is a facilitator, but I still think we saw him still flourish in Dallas with Doncic as the primary ball handler. And I don't think Jrue Holiday's as ball dominant as Doncic is. And I think him and Brunson would have a great partnership as a backcourt, and Josh Hart could easily slide into the 3 spot, or he could slide into the 6th, 7th man role. They added Dante DiVincenzo to form that little Villanova trio. But I would like to see him go to the Knicks. Personally, that's just me. I'm a bit biased towards the Knicks. I have a little soft spot for the Knicks. I think everyone hates them a little bit too much. I really like Jalen Brunson. I think Jalen Brunson, there's just something about him that I just really like. So I have a little soft spot for the Knicks. But I think basketball-wise, Philadelphia and the Knicks make the most sense out of those two, but I want to see him go to the Knicks. Responses from anyone, please.
I like that. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I do have a soft spot for the Knicks as well. Like, they have a great team. I'm not gonna lie. They just need a bit of experience. Like, when you look at their team, it's pretty solid. But adding that would definitely help them in the playoffs for sure. But you know who needs a backup point guard? The Bucks. Maybe he could spin the block on a minimum contract. Maybe he could.
The only other place that I would have thought would be an interesting place to go is if he went to Sacramento. But the only reason I wouldn't want to see him on the Kings is because I think the Kings' problems in terms of them being elevated to a championship level team are more in their wing play and their forward play. Because I think you got Fox, you got Sabonis. I want to see the Kings pick up one of these big young wing players, not Jrue Holiday. That's the only other place that really popped into mind when I was thinking about this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the Knicks and 76ers are both better options than Zach. And Jrue Holiday back. He spent the start of his career in Philadelphia as well, when they weren't good at basketball at all. So maybe be a full circle moment for him to go back to Sixers and maybe help them win a championship when he couldn't do the first time around.
Yeah. Now, listen, we will analyze the final aspect of this trade, and this is just something that caught my eye in relation to the Phoenix Suns, because there has been a lot of murmur, not only last year when they collapsed in the playoffs to the Dallas Mavericks, but now again this year when they ended up losing again in the second round, again in an embarrassing elimination game defeat at home at the hands of the Denver Nuggets, trading DeAndre Ayton. And this is something that finally happened for Phoenix. He was traded as a part of this deal to the Trailblazers, and they got Nurkic in return, who is someone that's going to benefit Frank Vogel's defensive identity that he really wants to impose on this Suns team. For me, I liked trading DeAndre Ayton. Not only do you release his big salary, but when you have the offensive firepower of Booker, of Durant, of Bradley Beal, you don't need a flashy sort of center who's going to pull up and take mid-range jumpers. Now, Nurkic does do that, but that's not really his game. And Nurkic is a big, solid body, whereas I thought DeAndre Ayton at times was soft and he was a complainer. I think it's a good trade for the Suns. Tyson, I want to ask you first from your perspective. Obviously, they're one of the biggest rivals to your Lakers. How do you think that this impacts the Suns, if any at all?
Well, it definitely benefits them because they had Ayton, which was a borderline star center, but he just did not want to be there towards the end of the season, you know? He was having some conflicts with the team, injury in the playoffs, but also just wanting to sit out as well. Like, it's a team sport, you know. You got to be there for your team. Just doesn't look like he wanted to be there. Seemed a bit selfish. And look, Nurkic definitely helps the Suns. Adds more depth as well with the other pieces. They got Grayson Allen as well and Nasir Little. Well, it definitely benefits the Suns. That's what I'm going to say. And Ayton was just a bit of a lost cause. I don't know if you guys seen him on Twitter, taking a bit of a lesson out of Zion's book with the females, getting a bit caught up there. But I reckon it's definitely good that they got rid of that young guy who was sort of holding them back. So definitely benefits the Suns.
Look, I absolutely hate the Suns, but I got to applaud them for this. This was brilliant. Like Hayden he's such a whiny little baby. Like it was good they got rid of him because you said, Luka, like they got rid of the big salary, they can add more depth in, and they don't need a scorer. Like Nurkic averaged 13 and 9, and he improved drastically from three. I think he shot 36% from three last season, which is decent. I think it's like average, slightly above average, but. What I also love about Nurkic, he has his injury concerns, but from the opening day to the 1st of February last season, he was 8th in the NBA for screen assists and 7th in points generated off those screens. So if Devin Booker was that point facilitator like we saw in the Nuggets series last season, I think they could capitalize off that, especially when they've lost Chris Paul and then you've got a backcourt of Beal and Booker. I think if they used and capitalize off that pick and roll, that could be deadly in the playoffs because, as you alluded, like they just need Nurkic, a big size in the perimeter, in the paint, just getting you a lot of boards. That's all you need. So I love this trade.
I think people also forget because Nurkic has been out for so long how good he actually is. Right, like Trailblazers in that prime with Lillard and CJ and Nurkic running that 1-2-3 punch, they made it far into the playoffs. Western Conference Finals, I'm pretty sure they made.
Finals, yeah.
So people forget how good Nurkic actually is. And as you guys both alluded to, Ayton did have those concerns of wanting to have a bigger role in Phoenix. Obviously, he was going to be the fourth option this year, right? This chance he now gets to go to Portland. He gets his chance to be one of those main options. And another really underrated part of this deal that I think everyone's overlooking is the fact that ever since that Kevin Durant trade, Suns have been criticised for their depth. They bring in Grayson Allen as well, who is really an underrated part of this deal, who started games for the Bucks last year. He's a starting shooting guard caliber player, and you've just added him to that 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th spot on your bench, and that's some great depth. So I think that also will elevate them quite a bit. It'll be a really, really good replacement behind Bradley Beal.
Yeah. They also. I know they got Eric Gordon from the Clippers, who, in the right circumstance, can be just a lights-out three-point shooter. He's been a bit hot and cold in his career. But I think the Suns, for how much criticism they were getting, they have done quite a good job of improving this roster depth. They signed Yuta Watanabe from the Nets, who was a top three-point shooter in the NBA as well. And he is friends with Kevin Durant. I think that was a big reason as to why he probably went there. So they have some underrated depth. They're definitely still not going to be one of the best benches in the NBA. We're not expecting that from them. But in the playoffs, you really have a 7-8 man rotation. So as long as they can get through the regular season and have some continuity, I'm hoping Frank Vogel is able to get them sorted on defense. But obviously, the Phoenix Suns' health concerns me. Durant, Beal, and Booker haven't played 53 games. None of them reached 53 games last year. But that's a different conversation for another day. Nurkic, at the end of the day, the main reason they got him is because he can bang with an Anthony Davis. He can bang bodies with a Jokic. Obviously, Jokic will probably kill anyone, but it's a better option than DeAndre Ayton. And I think that they used to be teammates as well. So they shipped out Nurkic because Jokic was getting better and had that increased role. He used to be a Denver Nugget once upon a time. I think most people forget. So I think from that perspective, that's also something that's going to help them in the playoffs if he is healthy, because injury concern is the thing. At least Ayton. I mean, he did get injured in this year's playoffs, which was also maybe one of the reasons he ended up getting shipped out. But up until then, he'd been pretty healthy. So I'll let anyone who wants the final word to have it, and then we'll wrap up, guys.
I mean, I think that's why I love the Suns so much more now, because I doubted them against the Nuggets last season because they didn't have that 6th, 7th, 8th play, like you said, Luka. I think a big part of why the Nuggets won last season, which I think is extremely underrated, was having Bruce Brown come off the bench. Because if you didn't have Jamal Murray or Jokic performing, you had that new energy coming off the bench to be able to spark something for the team. And I think that will be a huge loss for the Nuggets, which is why I love, like, because I kept criticizing the Suns about their depth, but I think this is extremely underrated, the moves they've been making to get that extra depth. And by getting rid of Ayton in that massive contract, you allow for more depth. And, like, I don't think this will be the end of it.
Tyson, Oscar, sorry, Josh.
Yeah,
It's
crazy.
gonna happen.
That's
Go
a
Oscar,
Shannon
go
Sharp
Oscar, man.
moment.
Do you think?
Do I need to wear a name tag now?
No. I got through the whole episode, but yeah, look, it'll be certainly something to monitor as the season goes on. I'm excited for the NBA. You guys are excited for the NBA. But that is all, ladies and gentlemen, for Priceless Takes, episode 41. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to my astounding guests, Josh, Tyson, and Reuben. Thank you for joining me. And Josh, thank you for your first appearance on the show. It will hopefully be the first of many.
Thank you, Luka.
I hope so, sir. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Make sure to keep following us on our socials. We are on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Always posting, always engaging. Check us out. Links in the description below. Tune into our episode next week where we'll be focusing back on the NFL, as well as tomorrow's episode, also about the NFL, for the content and all the latest around that. But thank you for tuning in to Priceless Takes, episode 41. I have been your host, Luka Price, and we will see you next time.